Okay, here we are. I am lucky to have Lisa Winston with me to talk about art. And I'd actually like to start with a little bit about your call, Lisa, to spiritual companioning. Where did you train? How did that unfold for you?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. Well, I actually, when I was in college, kind of did a lot of this kind of stuff. My roommate and I, people came and, unloaded and we listened. So fast forward though, many years later, I had a near-death experience in 2005, and that kind of led to a quickening of my spiritual emergence and awakening. And I started to explore different, rather than go for any psych eval, I started to explore spiritual paths. And I went through the 9 Gates Mystery School, which was a wonderful esoteric energy, body training. Then I got into labyrinth walks and I did energy healing. I, learned Reiki and Feng Shui. And I was just like this 6 years of intense kind of training. And then went to the Chaplaincy Institute in Berkeley, California. And that was 2015-16. Went through the chaplaincy program. So became an interfaith chaplain. And then realized, after working at a hospital for a year, I really want to be a spiritual director. That I wanted the longer term relationship. So
Yeah.
I went through the Chaplaincy Institute spiritual direction program, 2-year program.
Okay.
All right. So that's how I got here. And since that time, so I've been practicing for 3 years. I am now in a kind of a basic training for internal family systems therapy to figure out how to weave that into spiritual direction. And I've also been doing a wild writing program and finding interesting ways how all 3 of these things come together. So just ongoing education.
So life as a learning journey. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
So I particularly noticed your interest in art, visual art in particular, and wanted to talk about that. So talk a little bit, if you would, about how art became part of your spiritual direction work.
Sure. When I was young, I owned the art room in school. I was like where you could find me any time of the day. And I really took photography on as my primary modality of art, and went through school actually to be a photographer. And so photography is what I weave into my practice more than anything else, because it's easy. You can do it with an iPhone kind of thing. And working with an iPhone or a camera, it teaches people how to see. And there was a time where I was at a retreat and I got like a destiny memo. You know how those voices kind of show up and you go, what? I heard this voice say, you're to teach people to see. And so this is the weaving in of, here's a tool that helps people teach people how to see their inner landscape, their spiritual landscape, as well as external. So that's the primary focus for me.
So photography is your primary focus, and I've seen people divide the arts up for spiritual direction purposes into contemplative arts, expressive arts, and creative arts. Does that have any meaning or resonance for you? Do you want to speak about that?
And that's a really great observation. Thank you for pointing that out. Because I kind of talk about creative creative, healing, and sacred is how I kind of break it up. But what I'm really doing is contemplative. So rather than, more than it's contemplative more than it is expressive. I'm not necessarily asking people to paint or draw. If somebody comes to me and wants to do that, we'll do it. But that's not necessarily part of a standard offering, whereas photography tends to weave its way in more often.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's get practical. What are some of the techniques that you use to invite seekers to engage with the arts?
Sure. My space where I meet people I have photographs hanging on the wall. I have collage hanging on the wall. People notice and ask questions. I put change up the photograph behind me when I'm on Zoom to keep it fresh. And I always ask my clients, what kind of things they like to do. I have one client who is absolutely an artist. She does jewelry, she does stained glass, she knits. So then it's like the invitation to her is, okay, how does that become a spiritual practice? How does all your creativity become a spiritual practice? So right now she's working with contemplative knitting. She's like, I sit and I knit.
Right.
And this is where I'm in touch with God, and in the summertime, she'll be out in her garden, which is also a creative way to interface with spirit. So I always ask, it's like, what's the client interested in? I have another client who recently, she said to me, things have been kind of gray. I really respond to color. And she was going to Hawaii. And I said, okay, you're going to be in Hawaii for 6 days. Take your iPhone out each day, focus on one color and see how many things you can find with that one color, and really notice, how does it feel in your body? How does it impact your emotions? All that kind of thing. So it becomes a contemplative practice. So I would say that what I do is more contemplative than it is actual creation. Although I have led groups in mandala drawing and collage making, and then we talk afterwards, what comes up for people, what do you see, that type of thing. So it's almost self-led.
So you're providing the environment and the tools and allowing people to just play in the medium.
Right. And so more facilitation. And, when you're doing things like a half-day workshop with drawing or with collage, it's, you've got the opportunity to put on music, to dance, to do all kinds of, things that make it fun. Which I think a lot of times people get maybe a little bogged down with sometimes the heaviness that can happen when you're in a spiritual space instead of the upliftment. So
yeah, absolutely.
I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, there is I'm gonna call it a myth that you've got to be very serious if you're spiritual.
Yeah.
And of course, laughing Buddha, we know that's not true, but it kind of shows up that that's what's supposed to be happening. And so any opportunity to express joy through your body, and it sounds like you're able to integrate that with art.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic.
That's the hope. Anyway.
So let's hope, yes. So yeah, weaving it into a session. So say you're on Zoom,
Mhm.
you bring up the photo behind you, is that end up becoming a topic? Does that evoke something in the conversation? Do you
It
intend
can,
it to? Does it happen even though you don't intend it to?
it most often does happen, even though I don't intend it to, but it can be the topic. So if I cover my camera, then you have access to the photograph, and you could actually do a meditation with the photograph, as opposed to, sharing screen and doing all that kind of. This is just something I just discovered. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking, ooh, how can I use this again? But I do almost every, I would say the one thing that is pretty common for almost every session, whether it's individual or group, is the grounding meditation. And it's always visual. And a lot of
Mm.
times it has flowers. I'll be, imagine there's a lotus opening and closing at your heart center. And then picture someone that you love, or a deity, whoever you worship, in the center of the lotus, and then that expands into some kind of color, and vibration. So I'm always doing that kind of thing for grounding and opening. And then thank you. There have been times where I have had a client do a take-home assignment.
Mhm.
We were on Zoom. We were talking about photographs, and she said she enjoyed doing photography, and she was in a kind of a tough place right at that point. And I said, well, the next time we meet, during this month, take your phone out. And I gave her kind of a short list of, this is how I want you to approach it. And it's a contemplative approach. See what kind of, wander around, see what captures your attention, then go getting closer, become intimate with it, listen to it, look at it, ask its permission. And if it says yes, go ahead and snap a photo, sit with the photo afterwards, and do kind of the same process. So it was an interesting experience for her. It wasn't something that we continued, but I think she probably does it more often now on her own. So
It's so funny. These things are in our lives and you don't see them, which is what you were just saying, helping people see. My sister is a photographer, and of course, it is a spiritual practice of hers. She got a macro lens for her phone, so she's focusing down into the tiniest beauty, often flowers, often mosses, that sort of thing. And there's something about going small like that that feels really powerful.
it
And
takes
I'm
you,
noticing that with the
yeah, and
picture behind you.
it takes you into a whole new landscape. And the meditation that you do with the photographs, or that I take people through with photographs, is to actually imagine that they're in the image somewhere. So they spend,
Mm.
and then it's kind of like, what does it look like from that, and angle, and how does it feel, and that type of thing. And just to give you kind of an example, I am in the process of creating a whole bunch of, these are 9x6 postcards of images. I don't know if you can see them, not with the
Yeah,
background.
it's got to be in front of you.
Does it show up?
Ah, yeah. When it's in front of you, it does.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
as with these cards, what I can do is I can fan them out with someone who's sitting in my space upside down, so they can't see what it is. And that, just like an
Ah,
oracle
okay.
card. And then we can sit with it and kind of walk through what's coming up for them. I like to do it face down so that they don't see it's an energetic pull instead of a
Huh.
visual pull. Yeah,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
where mystery and the spirit are working together with us.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they look like about the same shape size as the Soul Collage
Yeah,
products.
yeah, yeah, they would be.
So I had a seeker who basically did that practice with her Soul Collage cards. She developed them over time, and then she had a deck,
Yep,
and then would pull one for the day,
yep,
which super practice. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, so do you have a sense of, I mean, it sounds to me like you're getting just as much art woven into an individual session as you are into a group session. Is there stuff that works better group and better individual, or
I would
I don't
say,
know, how would you compare?
yeah, so far in my experience, it works better. It works better in a group session that can be longer, because
Mm,
1 hour once a month doesn't have the same impact, unless they're really into photography and wanting to use this as their spiritual practice. Um, and I think that the group session allows for more room for creativity too, in terms of time for them to, if it's a drawing, like if it's a mandala class. I haven't really done that individually. I've done that more in a group,
mm,
mandala and collage. I've had clients come and say, hey, I'm working on this collage, let me show it to you. And then we kind of talk
yeah.
about it, and then they bring it the next time, and they bring it the next time, but they kind of initiated the process. Yeah. I want to
Yeah.
share
So
too. Yeah, it's,
go ahead.
we're meeting the client, the seeker, where they are. So if that's what they want to bring, that's what they bring. And a great example, I want to share this. I had a client who, she was on the autism spectrum, very high functioning, but boy, did I learn a lot about working with somebody who has, a different, um,
Different brain.
different, different brain. Um, she came to me and she said, I just want to draw today. And we were on Zoom. She said, I just want to draw. And I'm like, okay, I'll hold space for you while you draw. So that was the first session. That was the second time she came. She's like, I want to draw today. I'm like, okay, can I draw with you? She said, sure. So then she's on her space, I'm on my space. And I ask if we can add music. She's like, yeah, that'd be great. So no conversation happens in those two sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Third session, we both draw together. We have the music. And at the end, I saved 10 minutes. I said, is it okay if we talk about it at the end to see, share what we've been drawing? So we did that. So there was this progression. And it was
Mm-hmm.
beautiful because it helped her to open up and to be more comfortable talking about, what she was doing. And yeah, and the biggest thing I learned working with her, and we learned it together, is that people with that different ability struggle to answer open-ended questions, the kind of questions we like to ask.
Right. Right.
You got to be much more direct.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to say she ordained and is a minister.
Yeah. Great.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful that she was able to ask for what she needed, and that's the spiritual direction space. Of course, the spiritual direction space is holding space for you to commune with whatever you hold holy.
Right.
You are absolutely doing what you're supposed to be doing without uttering a word.
Yep. Yep. It's, the service of presence. Absolutely.
Yes,
So,
fantastic.
and now that we
Thank you
can,
for sharing that.
now that we can see people, in person, and the weather's better because we had 3 weeks of rain, I'm hoping that the clients that come see me, we can do some walk and talks where we actually go out together. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Great. Yeah, I do need to share that I have heard from folks on the spectrum that the phrase high functioning is unhelpful,
Uh-huh.
um,
That's good to
in that
know.
it feels like it's a rating kind of thing.
Mhm.
So just to clarify that, particularly anybody who's watching this,
Yeah.
um, to be
Thank you
aware
so
of
much
that.
for
Yeah,
thank you so much for that. Yeah.
yeah. You don't know till you know, right?
Learning all the
Yeah,
way along.
absolutely. Okay. So speaking of learning,
Mhm.
do you have any particular resources or trainings that you would point spiritual companions toward in terms of how to connect to artistic modalities, how to integrate them into your work, into spirituality?
Yeah. Um,
Super open-ended question here.
Super open-ended question, but I'm glad I had the questions beforehand.
Yeah.
Some really good resources that I just love and I rely on a lot for what I do. Christine Walters Paintner, do you know her? She's an author and a
Yep.
Benedictine Oblate. Any of her
Yeah.
books, but in particular, Eyes of the Heart,
Huh.
because she actually gives exercises you can do with clients with photography. So
Oh.
it's a great book. I was trained more in the Zen tradition. So the Zen of Creativity by John Dido Laurie Roshi. He was actually my teacher and one of my teachers. And that book talks a lot about the Zen aesthetic, but he also gives you the outline for how to meditate with images. And anything that, all what I'm talking about with meditation and contemplation with photography, you can do with artwork. I took a group to a museum one time and we meditated on, imagery in the museum. So you can
Yeah.
do that. If you're looking for photographs, I've actually started posting, providing most of my stuff on Pexels, which is a free downloadable space. And I'll give you the link in the chat later. But
Great.
and I mean, other places I've been thinking about are really things like where to get training for integrating a spiritually transformative experience, a near-death experience, existential crisis, how to really integrate that into, a session and help people integrate that into their daily lives, because that's becoming, both with climate change and the eco crisis, the environmental crisis, and with the uptick in psychedelic therapies, I see that as a place that's rising, a rising opportunity for spiritual directors and companions to really find ways to get training for those types of things in particular. There's an
Yeah.
organization,
Spiritual crisis.
spiritual crisis. There's an organization called I can remember the letters ACISTE, ACIST, and they actually have a certification program for people, to train in crisis, spiritual crisis, essentially. So that would be a place.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
Okay. If you think of others, we can always put them in written
yeah,
form.
yeah, yeah.
But, yeah. Um, is there Are there modalities that you think particularly lend themselves to spiritual direction work? Or is it entirely I heard you talking about the person who knits.
Right.
Is it entirely about what floats that person's boat?
Yeah. Yeah, I think generally it is, whatever floats that person's boat. I think photography is easier than writing or than drawing and painting, simply because it can be contemplative and inquiry, all about inquiry, as opposed to creating stuff. And one of the things we haven't really touched on is how do you break through that barrier when somebody says, "But I'm not an artist, I'm not creative." And my response,
Yeah.
my response typically is, do you cook? Do you bake? Do you garden? Those are all creative things. So it's this work that we do with any, inserting any kind of creativity or contemplation around creativity into spiritual direction is really about bypassing the mind and getting to the heart. And so it's like, how do we, and we can do that in a creative situation by music and dance, ways to just kind of get past that critic that lives in our brain. This writing program that I'm in, actually, the instructions are to write as fast as you can and as sloppy as you can. You're given prompts, but that's the whole point, is to bypass the inner critic and just write. It's like you're meditating and you're noticing the thought that comes in, but you're writing it down. So you've got kind of this stream of consciousness. Yeah. So it's boy.
And you called that wild writing?
Wild writing, yep. And I can give you the link for that. Yep. Wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
Any kind of dream work that you can do. I do some energy healing with crystals. All the client comes in, I pull up in a drawer. Do you want to hold a crystal today? Whatever they choose kind of gives me a read on what their energy, where their energy's at. I have one client that loves to do everything: Enneagrams, dreams, astrology, oracle, and tarot cards. So we play with it all. So all of that's welcome and helpful. Yeah.
Yes. My personally, I actually relate to sculpting a lot, particularly something like Play-Doh, where it becomes something and then it disappears, then becomes something else and then disappears, and that tactile contact experience. And I've heard people say that about finger paints, and somebody say that about paint pouring, and other ways where you're just kind of physically connecting. And I kind of have two questions in here. One is, I have had a hard time getting people willing to play with Play-Doh. It feels silly to them. And then also, just sort of more generally, there's getting over the silliness, and then there's they're not that accessible. How can you make those kinds of things accessible? I don't know if you've had any luck with that.
Yeah, I haven't played with that or worked with it or tried that with any clients. I will say, I remember in one of my classes, they had us do like the sand tray thing, and here's all the dinosaurs and the little, and I absolutely thought it was hysterical and silly. And I'm down on the floor, and I'm building my scene. And then when I got through it all, I was like, oh, there's a whole life story here. So, yeah. is that easier in a group or individually? I feel almost
I
like in a
wonder.
group.
It might be in a group.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's, you know, in an individual session, the spotlight's on you. There's nowhere to hide.
And there's no normalization of the silliness. Okay,
No.
we are all doing silliness, and that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So, but yeah, all those are wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful ideas.
So as I was saying, I particularly relate to sculpture. I like doodling, music, dance. So I really appreciate that you were able to bring your joy and your love for the visual arts, for the helping people to see. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to that showed up for you or is arising in this moment that you might
Mm.
want to share?
I do want to say that what I've been learning recently is that it's really important that we know our blind spots and our triggers and our shadows, and that there are going to occasionally be bumpy sessions with clients and seekers, and how, you know, to be ready, you know, to just know they're going to happen, and to know that you can get past it if you're willing to be, in my experience, if you're willing to be like a little vulnerable and share, you know, what's up for you. And then, you know, share it with your supervisor or your peer group, whoever's, you know, helping to support you.
On your team. Yeah.
Your team. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So is there anything else you can think to ask?
Ah. Uh, no, I guess not. Um, I'm just grateful that you were able to spend the time and talk about something that you clearly love and obviously is a meaningful and what's the word? I don't want to say effective. That's not the right word. Transformational part of
Yeah.
your spiritual
Thank you.
direction work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I have started doing these workshops that I call beauty as medicine. And it all, I mean, essentially there's storytelling at the beginning, go out in nature in the middle, come back and we meditate on images. It's, you know, but it's
Mm,
so nurturing and revealing.
yeah. Uh,
So, yeah.
well, thank you
I
very
really,
much. And
I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Amy. And, you know, if there's other things we can do, let me know. But
all right,
I'll
great.
send you
I'm
the
going to
link.
end the recording.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
send you those links.